COVID-19 is in our communities and the number of cases is on the rise. So it's essential that we each play our part in full by following all of the government guidance. Only by doing this can we keep our schools and businesses open. If you're young and healthy, you may feel the virus isn't a threat to you. But someone more vulnerable to coronavirus than you, perhaps someone closer to you than you realise, is depending on you to play your part in breaking the chain of transmission. So I'm asking everyone to do their bit. Stick to the rule of 6 for gatherings indoors or outdoors. Wash your hands thoroughly and regularly. Wear a face covering in enclosed spaces. Observe social distancing of 2 meters or 1 meter plus precautions where 2 meters really isn't possible. Follow all of the guidelines about car sharing. If you have symptoms, self-isolate and get a free test immediately. If we work together on this, we can control the spread of the virus. Thank you.
Chairman, it's now streaming live.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Children and Young People's Committee, which obviously is being held remotely with, I think, all, if certainly the majority of the 11 members joining the meeting from their own homes. For anyone that is listening, because we don't have nameplates in front of us as we would at County Hall, I will just introduce who the main participants are. Members of the committee, first of all, myself, Philip Owen, as chairman of the committee, and we have Councillor Sue Saddington and Tracy Taylor as the 2 vice chairmen. We have Councillor Helen Ann Smith, Councillor Boyd Elliott, Councillor John Handley, Councillor Errol Henry, JP, Councillor Paul Henshaw, Councillor Roger Jackson, Councillor John Peck, and Councillor Liz Plant. I don't think I've missed anybody out. And the officers that we have present today are Colin Pettigrew, who is the Corporate Director for the department, and we have Service Directors Marion Clay, Steve Edwards and Lawrence Jones, and the clerk to the meeting is Martin Gately. Now, this, as you will be aware, is the third virtual meeting of this committee, which is held in line with the requirements of the Coronavirus Act of 2020. And I ask for your forbearance if we have any technical issues. I understand there have been some already this morning, so at any time somebody could disappear and we'll have to wait until they reappear as if by magic. I hope we don't have to hold the meeting, but I'm sure you'll understand if we do. Can I suggest, as this is a relatively small meeting, that you can keep your cameras on, then I can see you all. And as you know, those that have been on this committee since we started doing it virtually, that I like to try and conduct it as normally as possible. So rather than use the hand signal, if you can put your own hands up physically, I can see you and hopefully won't miss anybody. And then when it comes to the voting, you can put your hands up rather than have a roll call, unless, of course, anybody wants a recorded vote. So if we can do that, and we'll see how it goes. It's worked okay in the past. And I'm happy if you want to keep your microphones on, unless we get any untoward background noises like dogs barking or radios coming on or household disputes or anything like that, although it might be more entertaining than the actual committee meeting. We'll see. Anyway, moving on to the agenda, the first item on the agenda are the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 20th of July. Do I have your approval to sign them as a true record? Yep.
Move it, Chairman.
Thank you. Everybody happy with that? Apparently, I don't have to ask for a vote on that. The next item, apologies for absence and substitutions. I think the committee clerk has one to report. So, Mr. Gately, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Chairman. So there are no apologies, but I have a substitution, which is Councillor Helen Ann Smith substituting for Councillor Deakin.
Thank you. Declarations of interest by members and officers. Those are disclosable pecuniary interests and private interests. Are there any that anyone wishes to declare at this point?
No.
Nope. Okay, thank you. In which case, then, we can move on to the substantive part of the agenda, which is item number 4. And item number 4 is the National Minimum Fostering Allowances Payments rates to foster carers 2020-2021, with the report set out in front of you, and there is one recommendation on page 3 of the report, which I am happy to move.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Any comments or questions? Councillor Plant.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, fully support the recommendation. And I'd also like to congratulate the Fostering Services Recruitment and Assessment team on obviously the work they've done to increase foster parents during what has been a very difficult time. And hopefully they will continue to go from strength to strength. And what is still amazing, though, is that we've still got 258 children who are in independent foster care still. And that, you know, that can cost up to £300 a week more. It is outrageous, really. So we still need to work to obviously get that number down. By my maths, that still leaves us, this is really the question, really, that still leaves us with 269 children. Nearly 30% of our looked after children who obviously are not in any form of foster care, be it local authority ones or independent. So I would just like to ask the officers, I mean, I'm assuming obviously some of those will be in children's homes in the county, or perhaps in children's homes out of county, special guardianship, supported accommodation, whatever. So what I would like is could we have a breakdown of where those other children are? I know it's a movable feast and things are changing all the time, but I would just be really I'm very interested to see where those 269 children are. Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions before or comments? No, I don't know whether Steve, is it you or is Lawrence going to? Steve, are you going to?
Yeah, I can respond to that. Yeah, you can definitely have a breakdown. You're absolutely right, Councillor Plant. Some are placed with family and friends carers. Some are placed for adoption but not yet adopted. Some are in residential care. Some are in semi-independent supported placements. But we can certainly give you a list of those. And I just also agree with you that the fostering service have made fantastic strides forward following the committee supporting the new proposals last September. I think it was 75% increase, and possibly a further 41 carers approved by the end of the calendar year. It is absolutely brilliant, and it does mean that people can have real high quality fostering placements more locally, and we're not spending that additional money that we don't need to spend to give to sort of private fostering firms. So I think it is a really positive story around fostering, and of course we could always do more, but we're actually moving in the right direction, which feels positive.
Good. Thank you very much for those comments and questions. I think the figures demonstrate just how desperate we are still for additional foster carers, and I would encourage anybody who feels that they have something to offer to at least make enquiries, and we do offer an enormous amount of support in order for people to become foster carers. And I think the fostering service has done an incredible job under normal circumstances to get 41 additional carers on stream, let alone in the current climate. I think it speaks volumes to the quality of the staff that we have and their dedication and commitment. But it's a never-ending feast, if you like. We've got to keep on, and we do keep on, and hopefully we shall be able to recruit more foster carers as time goes on, because of course we do have some who are retiring as well. So there is a desperate need for foster carers, and I know corporate comms play a big part in trying to advertise our programmes, and that's all to the good. So with those few comments, the report has been moved and seconded. Could I have a show of hands, all those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? No, that is carried. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is item number 5, which is child sexual exploitation and children missing from home and care, the annual report for 2019-20. Again, the report is set out in a familiar form, I think, now to members of this committee who have been members for some time. And on page 20, well, page 8 of the actual report, 20 of the bundle of documents, you have 2 recommendations that are set out in front of you. The first one to note that we agree to receive quarterly performance data included in the quarterly performance report, and then the annual report as well. So I'm happy to move that.
I will second it, Chairman.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from members? Councillor Peck.
Yes, this is always a very interesting report and very helpful to the committee in getting a greater understanding of the issues and the actions that are being taken. The report is obviously for the past year, so will have barely been affected by what has happened during the COVID crisis and the lockdown, which really only started at the tail end of when this report is up to. So we won't fully know the effect, if any, that the pandemic might have had on any of these figures. I wonder if the officers can just tell us whether they get any sense that, that there has been any effect since then with relation to any aspects within the report.
Any other comments and questions before I ask the officer? Councillor Helen Ann Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Whilst welcoming the fact that these figures have gone down compared to the last year, what effect do you think the COVID-19 lockdown has had on these figures? And to your knowledge, was there a rise in grooming on social media accounts like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Whilst the report mentions that 33% of contact was online, the report barely mentions the online threat and doesn't cover the dangers of the internet in its priorities. Do you expect these figures to be higher, and what are we doing to engage young people about the dangers of online grooming? And it might be a benefit if we had an explicit report dealing directly with the dangers of online grooming. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to pick that one up? And I don't know whether Marion's there. Marion, you might like to say something about what is done in schools regarding online grooming, because I think quite a lot of work goes on there as well. So, Steve, over to you first of all.
Okay, well, you're right. It is difficult to say what some of the work in the later report about performance does cover some of the lockdown period, but I actually think it's probably too early to start to be confident about unpicking it, because some of the things that have happened during lockdown we won't know about yet. So, you know, there were some unknown knowns, I guess, from lockdown that we won't be able to unpick. I think, yeah, it's difficult to say at the minute. In terms of online grooming, whether that will have gone up or not during a lockdown is difficult to say, really, because children already were spending an awful lot of time on social media before lockdown, hours and hours. So whether that's social media has increased, what we do know, I suppose, is that the whole area constantly changes, and as the police and social care crack down in one sort of area, people who are intent on harming or abusing children find new ways to operate. So it will remain, you know, a priority area for us. We invest an awful lot in it. We've got Tackling Emerging Threats to Children team that works closely with schools to provide advice to schools. We've got a contract with a provider to support children who have been abused online or abused. We do a lot of work to ensure that children go missing or are interviewed. We have CSE strategy meetings. So there's a lot of work that we do that's sort of embedded now, and we're absolutely not complacent about the threat during lockdown, or actually the threat out of lockdown, because whether we're in lockdown or out of lockdown, it's a serious sort of issue, and we need to constantly keep a close eye on it. I don't know if Lawrence wants to add anything to that.
Just briefly to say, obviously the CSE agenda in terms of the safeguarding partnership, so the work that we're doing with health, police and other colleagues remains high on the agenda and as part of the annual business plan. Part of that is obviously working across a range of partners in terms of online dangers. So the education that Steve talked about, a lot of which is present in schools and other forums in terms of delivering on some of that education to try and keep people safe online. Online is difficult in that it's an international problem rather than a local one. So the responses to it are often not local people who potentially are looking to harm young people in Nottinghamshire. They can be from anywhere in the world. So really that kind of education and reporting and the messages that we give to children and to parents about how they keep scrutiny are absolutely key. But I can assure you it remains high in terms of the partnerships work in terms of that area. I think in terms of the specific report, I think the annual report actually from the safeguarding partners, when it comes, will probably address some of that quite clearly in that. So hopefully, if there's remaining issues after you've seen that, then maybe we could bring something more specific in time to come.
Thank you. Marion, is there anything that you want to add to that as to what goes on in schools?
No, I think I would just add what Steve and Lawrence have said. On top of the safeguarding report, there's been a tech annual report, or every 18 months or so, and again, that will provide information. There is not a school in Nottinghamshire that does not prioritise working with children and their families and carers about how you stay safe online. It's just what you do in schools now. It's part of the core curriculum. On top of being able to discern between fact, fiction and anything else on social media and on the media as well. So it is absolutely a priority for our schools. It's just what they do now. And so I think I would just reiterate that I have a high degree of confidence in schools prioritising keeping children safe. But with the caveats that Steve and Lawrence have said, is that this largely happens when children are on their own and not supervised.
Good, thank you. I think it's fair to say an awful lot is being done to address the issues, but if anybody's got any ideas as to what more could be done, then of course we're always open to suggestions. Anyway, the report has been moved and seconded, or the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? No, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is item number 6, which is the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, the action plan, which is set out in the pages in your report bundle. And there are 2 recommendations on page 9 of the actual report, and I will move those 2 recommendations.
I'll second those, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions on this report? Councillor Peck.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, this is a very helpful report that we receive on a regular basis. I will say that I think that the local authority has acted throughout this issue in a very responsible way, and I think this report is evidence of that. These very serious matters, which are a real blot on the history of the County Council, have been dealt with, I think, in a very responsible way throughout. I don't think anything has been brushed under the carpet. I think we've been very open about accepting our responsibilities, and I think that comes through in the report. And it's evident that a great deal is being done and will continue to be done in the future in respect of all the issues there, the support for the victims and the survivors, and most importantly as well, learning the lessons from what has gone on in the past and hopefully trying to ensure that this never happens again. So all of that, I think we can all support. What I haven't heard of recently is much from the ongoing inquiries of the police. I know these have been very long term and will probably go on for some considerable time, and once in a while we hear about somebody who has been accused or found guilty of historical abuse in our care homes, but it just seems, I'm sure it hasn't gone quiet, but I haven't heard anything much recently, so I don't know if there's any if there's an officer can update us on any of that, how the inquiries are progressing, and the involvement we have in that. I assume there are regular meetings still taking place and so on with the police. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Peck. Councillor Plant.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah. Certainly, just to echo what Councillor Peck has just said, it is a very thorough report, and it does address all the issues that were raised in the inquiry. And just to comment on the what has been set up since as regards the visits to the local authority children's homes, which Councillor Saddington and myself have obviously undertaken. And I have to say it's a completely different system than we had prior to the ICSA report. It is, we are, in terms of the Children's Homes Governance Board that meets regularly and has continued to meet regularly, virtually obviously during the pandemic, we are given very thorough reports about the workings of all our children's homes. Obviously, it's a very different system than when the abuse took place in terms of the size of the children's homes. You can never say never, but because you just can't do that. But without a doubt, we've had comprehensive information. Sue and I have visited not all. Obviously, the visits have stopped because of the pandemic. But when we go on those visits, whereas last time you probably had a quick walk around and a quick chat with the manager, well, not necessarily quick, you didn't really see what was going on in those homes. Obviously, again, the children, the majority of them were at school or at college. On the visits that we have made, we have met with the children. We've had quite interesting conversations with those who want to talk to us. Obviously, they don't all, and obviously very comprehensive conversations with the staff. So it has been a completely different procedure. Obviously, when it's safe to do so, we will continue. And also, by that time, Sue's knees will be better, so that will also be helpful.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, I think without a doubt we made an excellent response, and obviously it's to continue that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I should like to place on record my thanks to both you, Councillor Plant, and indeed to Councillor Saddington for undertaking those visits, which I think are very important now, and as you say, are very different in nature from what we had originally. I had a very uneasy time at the inquiry when I was literally under the spotlights, when we were talking about visits under the old regime of visiting, which was never intended to be what they are now. And I think that was something that the media didn't pick up upon. They were much too keen to denigrate existing councillors, myself included, for not going necessarily when children were present. And that was never the idea. Of course, I spoke to them if they wanted to, if they were present, but that was never the idea. And we have changed all of that, and it is a better system. There's no doubt about it. It gives much greater political oversight of what is going on in our children's homes. And as you say, Councillor Plant, you can never say never, but I would hope we're as close to never as we possibly can be. But that, perhaps, I'm going to touch wood here at the side of me, because something can just pop up right out of the blue that you don't know about. But I think the response of this authority has been magnificent, and it hopefully puts to bed some of the appalling things that happened, which did not cover the authority at that time in glory. It was a disgraceful episode, or series of episodes, and one that we don't ever want to return. So I think with those, Councillor Peck, I think you did ask a specific question, didn't you?
Yes, just about the ongoing police inquiry.
Yes, sorry, I'd forgotten about that. Steve, can you reassure Councillor Peck on that?
Okay, so so we continue to work with the police on investigations and allegations against professionals and colleagues. There was a committee report recently that members agreed that the historic funding for the historic abuse team would continue and transform into a permanent team to deal with allegations against professionals. And that team is about to come into sort of fruition, I think, in in October. So those colleagues continue to do the work when there's an allegation against professionals. They continue to work really, really closely with the police on those, and there have always been and will always be allegations against professionals. They're mostly allegations against teachers, but that's only because there are thousands more teachers than there are foster carers, residential workers, sort of police officers, anyone else really. But that work is progressing. I think it's really, really positive now that we've given it dedicated responsibility. It's a team's day job to do that and progress that, because it can be quite complicated, allegations against professionals. So I think we're having the historic abuse team, and the councillors agreeing to fund that right at the start of the ICSA investigation has given us it was a good platform to build on, and I think we've built on it successfully, and there will carry on being allegations against professionals, and I think we're in a good place to deal with them, but there aren't the same level of allegations as there were 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Thank you very much for that. The recommendations set out on page 9 have been moved and seconded. Could I have a show of hands? All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? No, that is carried. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is item number 7, which are changes to the staffing establishment in the CAMS Children Looked After and Adoption team. Again, you have a report in front of you, and there is one recommendation set out on page 2 of the report, which I move.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on that report? No, in that case, can we move straight to the vote? All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you very much. Item number 8 on the agenda, foster carer items. As members of the committee will know, we normally have this on every 3 months to give foster carers or foster care representatives who wish to come along to the committee the opportunity to address the committee with any particular concerns or issues that they might have. I'm assuming, Steve, that we don't have any foster carers present with us this morning.
No, we haven't. No, and there were no issues as well from the foster carers. So we have been in contact with them. There's nothing that they thought they should bring to committee.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we can tick that item off as having been covered. The next item on the agenda is item number 9, which is the Children and Young People Core Dataset Performance and Finance for Q1. You have a detailed report in front of you, and you have a recommendation on page 9 of the report, which I'm happy to move.
I'm happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Councillor Peck, you first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The financial figures in the report, which start on paragraph 33, do make for pretty sobering reading. I think you'll agree. The department is already under considerable pressure financially, as we know. This isn't a criticism, it's just the nature of children and young peoples and the financial pressures that are on departments such as ours. There's clearly been a significant impact on the department from the COVID situation, and I've no doubt that will be the case across departments, but there's certainly been a significant impact on this department, and no doubt there will be for some time to come, and that is clearly going to be quite difficult to deal with. With the other comment I just wanted to make was with regard to educational attainment, and normally in one of these reports would be looking and making comparisons with A-level and GCSE results. This year is going to be something of an aberration, isn't it, because of what happened with examinations this year, and I think that this year is not one that we'll ever be able to use to make any meaningful comparisons with with other years. I mean, I did think at the time, and I think probably even more so now, that we should have gone ahead with at least A-level results, if not A-level examinations, if not GCSE. I'm sure a way could have been found, as it has been in several other countries, to have enabled those examinations to take place, but they didn't, and that's the way of things, and we've got to live with that. I trust that we're in a similar situation as we are now, and I hope we're not by next year, that examinations will go ahead, but we're not going to be able to make any comparisons with educational attainment, as I've said, and that's really water under the bridge now, and we've just got to accept that situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Councillor Plant.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just really pleased to see that the return when children go missing. Obviously, it's been an issue that it's not always possible to get the reasons why they've gone missing. So it is interesting that in this quarter, it says that they've actually gone up to 80% from 64%, because it was quite low in the report we had previously on missing children. So that's good, and interesting that obviously those interviews they've not all been done face to face. So presumably either by phone or iPad or Zoom, I don't know. But it's interesting that perhaps that would be something good to take from COVID moving forward, that perhaps some children will prefer to do that. Find the face-to-face interview difficult, and there are other ways, obviously, of trying to get to the bottom as to why they have gone missing and to see if anything can be put in place to prevent them doing it again. So that's good news. And my next is a question. Paragraph 23, where it's saying that it's about obviously the youth service, and I know that the youth service has obviously been doing some really good work within our children's home during the pandemic, when obviously they can't open the centres, and they've also been doing some outreach work, which is I'm sure will certainly be needed at this time. But it actually says, the last sentence is which will provide an opportunity to promote the reopening of mainstream youth work sessions from today. So I just really want to know, is that happening? And if so, how so? Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Plant touched on it, really. I was simply going to record thanks to the staff who've been involved. This report only covers a portion of the COVID period, but the adaptability and the initiative and just out of the box thinking that the staff have shown in providing support in different ways, particularly through youth services. I just wanted to make sure that we recorded that acknowledgement of all of our staff teams looking after children and young people, both social workers and the youth services and others. I think it's possibly for officers to answer Councillor Plant's question about opening today. I do believe that is going ahead, unless Steve knows differently now.
Thank you. Lawrence, are you able to pick up the youth club issue, or is Steve?
No, that's me. That's Steve. Me. Yeah. So the good news is that touch wood, and you never know what's going to happen between now and when the youth club's open later on today. But that is the plan. And Pom and his colleagues have been working really, really closely with colleagues from public health to understand the government guidance and apply that and make sure that our young people and our staff are as safe as they can be. And the plan is to reopen the youth club from today. It'll be a new normal. It'll be different. They'll be working probably with smaller numbers to start off with, but it's really positive. And you're absolutely right. We have learnt a lot during lockdown, and some of the virtual contacts that we've had with children and families have been really, really positive. That's contacts from social workers, early health workers, some of the youth workers across the piece, those WhatsApp conversations, telephone conversations, all of those virtual things. A lot of them have been really, really positive, and it's meant that we've probably kept in touch with children and families in a mixture of face-to-face visits and virtual visits more than we might have done in some areas before the lockdown, which is really, really positive. And we've learnt a lot by the way that the youth service and outdoor education can support some of the most difficult children. So some of the children that were struggling to maintain the foster placement or the placement in residential care before the lockdown found it increasingly difficult to cope when there was lockdown, and actually there was no space to go anywhere. It was like a pressure cooker for some of those placements. So the youth service have done youth work activities in our residential homes to support people. They've actually opened the outdoor education centres and some of the youth clubs as places of safety. So rather than a placement disrupt, people have gone to Hag Farm or St Michael's or to the Mill Adventure Base for a weekend or a night, just to relieve the pressure for the carers and the young person. And it's made a significant difference. It helped to reduce the number of children that would have had a placement disruption. And that's really, really positive, because obviously that's better for children and carers when you can do that. It's also massively better for the budget, because children tend to go from when a placement disrupts to a more expensive placement rather than a less expensive placement. So there's a lot of learning from what we've done during lockdown that we will be taking forward and into the future. We will have a much more blended and joint approach to a lot of things.
Thank you for that, Steve. Is there any other officers that wishes to add anything or make any comment on the observations that have been made by members? No? Well, in that case, can I add my thanks to all those in the youth service who have helped so magnificently during this COVID crisis. Clearly, youth clubs couldn't operate and didn't operate, but they weren't sat idle, as Steve Edwards has said, and they've provided an enormous amount of input and support to some of our most vulnerable and difficult young people. And I think we should thank them for that work and that flexibility that they have shown. And let's keep our fingers crossed that the youth clubs now can open safely. Councillor Peck, you outlined the financial pressures. I think they're going to get worse. That's my personal view, because I think we're going to see, now that children are back in school, we're going to see more referrals, significantly more referrals to the MASH, with the consequences down the line that I suspect more children will need to be taken into care. And I think it could be a significant number. I don't know at this stage, but I fear for the worst on that. I do agree with you as far as A levels is concerned, but we are both speaking with the benefit of hindsight, which is a wonderful thing. And I recall at the start of the lockdown, there was great fear, I think, amongst everyone, that this was going to spread like wildfire, and that children, young people, were as vulnerable to this disease as we who are of more mature years, shall I say. And I think the government, or the Secretary of State at that time, took what he thought was the right decision. With hindsight, probably A levels could have gone ahead, and it would have been better, but again, with the benefit of hindsight, if they had have gone ahead, and we wouldn't have had all the furore over the algorithm, which I don't pretend to understand, and the subsequent problems with university entrance. Now, I don't think those problems, those issues have gone away, I have to say. It's been my view, and it was substantiated in an article that I read, and I forget in which newspaper, which is saying that really the problem has now been passed to the universities, because there will be a number, and it may well be a significant number, of young people who have been given university places on the basis of estimated grades, who wouldn't necessarily have got those places and who may well find it difficult going when they start the rigours of university life. Because let's be clear, it's not all partying. Freshers' Week is 1 week where the partying used to take place, although I could never afford to when I was there. It's real hard work, and certainly I think some of our young people may well struggle. And so I think there are going to be problems further down the line, but that will be for the universities to sort out. We've had no information as yet as to what's going to happen as far as exams are concerned next year. I've not picked up anything on the exam circuit. All we know is that there are going to be resits in October and November. I'm not sure that they necessarily now really need to go ahead, quite frankly, in view of the fact that everybody was awarded their estimated grade. But we'll see what happens there. So with those few observations, I put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? No, that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. If we can move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is item 10, the Nottinghamshire Special Education Needs and/or Disabilities Policy 2020 to 2023. Again, you have the report set out in front of you, and there are two recommendations on page 4 of the report, which I'm happy to move.
I'm happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on that report? Councillor Peck.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we support the principles and aspirations as set out in the report. It's a good report. It's a good policy, and I don't think there's anything in there that any of us could particularly disagree with at all. I think there will be continue to be significant pressures in the area of special educational needs. I think people's expectations, parents' expectations continue to rise, and the demands on special educational needs provision there's always been a significant pressure, and that will continue to be so. And if you talk to any head teacher, they will always tell you that there isn't enough funding in the system. There isn't enough support for some of the children with special educational needs in their schools and so on. That was ever thus. I think, as the report sets out, a lot has been learned over the last 30 odd years. Certainly in my time, I think the provision that we give now in the local authority has moved significantly from what it was 20, 30 years ago, and you would hope that that would be the case. The report does mention, as we've seen before, I think this has been discussed for a few years now, looking for additional sites to increase provision in the Ollet view. Is that this probably shouldn't be an either or, because I think the need for special need places in special schools, whilst that has been increased quite a bit, I think there will probably be a sufficient call for additional schools, possibly in both of those areas, just based on what I know and understand at the present time about demand. The other thing that I'd want to mention is I think part of that increased demand is around the area of autism, which we've learned a lot about over the last few years. In my early days in teaching, we probably wouldn't have diagnosed any child in our class with autism. We knew very little about the subject, but now we know that there for whatever reason, whether it's increased diagnosis or whatever, there are increased numbers of children being diagnosed with autism, and particularly there's a demand for special school provision at the high end of autism. I think through you, Chair, I think it might be very helpful for the committee at some point in the future to receive a report on autism, the provision that's being made within our schools and within the local authority, so that perhaps we as committee members can increase our understanding of the whole area of autism at the provision that we are making in the authority, and what we perhaps hope to provide in the future, and all the work that's going on with our schools. I think that would be extremely helpful. I don't know if you agree with that, but certainly I would like to perhaps open up the discussion about that particular field. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No. Well, in that case, as far as funding is concerned, Councillor Peck, yes, it's always the perennial cry, there's not enough money. Anybody that works in the public sector says there's not enough money. It doesn't matter which area of the public sector they work in, they always say there's not enough money. Whenever I talk to my son, who's a doctor, he tells me there's not enough money, and so on and so forth. It is ever thus. I would just point out, though, if you look at paragraph 9 of the report on page 2, we have received one of the highest increases. That's not to say we wouldn't like more. We would, but I think we can feel quite pleased with ourselves as far as that is concerned. As far as a report on autism, yeah, I'm not opposed to that at all. I'll talk with officers and see whether it's perhaps better as a report, or maybe even a presentation outside of the committee, where we can perhaps invite all members of the council along, engendering that concept that they are all corporate parents. I know this extends beyond looked after children, but nevertheless, if we can engender that idea of a corporate parenthood across the council, then I'm happy to do that. So we'll certainly look at that, because, as you say, it is an area where there have been considerable developments in recent years, and I don't pretend to understand too much about it either, as I'm sure you probably don't, like me, because there used to be naughty boys and girls in our day rather than having an ism. But we can be educated in that. So with those few comments, the report has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? No, that is carried. Thank you very much. If we can come now to item 11 on the agenda, which is Manners Sutton Primary School, Averham. I don't know if it's Averham or Averham. Councillor Saddington will put me right because it's in her division. Proposed consultation regarding closure. Again, you have a report in front of you, and there is one recommendation on page 5 of the report, which I will move.
I will second, Chairman.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this? Councillor Peck.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just briefly to support the report, it's clear that the numbers at the school have gone down to such an extent that they appear to be not viable now, and some parents are evidently voting with their feet. The report does say that closure is an option. It's not a report to close the school at this stage, but it says that it's an option. And all I can say is that there appears to be a bit of an inevitability about this. I think there is a stage reached where any school ceases to become realistically viable, and that seems to be the case both financially and in terms of pupil numbers in this instance. So yes, we support the report.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from members? No. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Peck. I believe at this, the situation is at the moment we haven't got any children in the school. Which is an absurd situation.
It's definitely not viable then.
The governors of the school were aware of the declining role, and I think, and Councillor Saddington will correct me if I'm wrong, I think the story got out into the community that the school wasn't viable, so the parents of those few children that were on roll sought to transfer, which you can well understand, and that whilst some were expected starting in September, none actually turned up. And so the head teacher and the governors have asked us to start this statutory process of consultation. I mean, common sense would dictate that it would close today, wouldn't it? But we have to go through this statutory process, which will drag it out, and we'll leave officers to manage that. What I would say is that, coming back, Councillor Peck, to something that you said in a previous report, we are going to look at the possibility of converting this, reopening it, if you like, as a special school provision. But that is early days yet. And again, we would no doubt need to have to go out to consultation. Councillor Saddington, you're indicating that you would like to make a comment. It's your division, so please feel free.
Well, I think I'm a bit late, Chairman, because you've done a bit of summing up. But basically, to put it on record, it is referred to as AREM. Everybody has a problem with it, but it is AREM. And I did look into the parish council, which incorporates Airham, Kellam and Staythorpe, which are 3 villages, and they go as one. And they had their parish council meeting last week, and it was on their agenda. So I was only in for a short time, but they allowed me to speak on 1 or 2 issues. And I did just refer to this and said that it was coming to committee today. And I think it's an inevitability with them that, you know, there are no children there, but the teachers are there. The teachers are still linked to the school, but the children, as you say, have gone to other schools. And as long as there aren't children in the school, I guess there won't be any others coming in new. It's a great shame. It's a lovely little school, but like anything else, people have moved on in time, and we'll just have to see what the consultation has in store. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Saddington. I stand corrected, Airham. It's a bit like Southwell and Southwell, isn't it?
Oh yes, and Roxton and
we won't go into that. Anyway, the recommendation has been. Sorry.
Yes.
It's always Southwell.
It's Southwell, unless you pass.
Southwell.
Let's not get into, let's not fall out. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. I think anyone against? No, I think that's unanimous. The next item on the agenda, communication strategies for first admission to primary school and transfer from infant to junior primary school in September 2021, and for Nottinghamshire statutory consultation on admission arrangements 2022-2023. Again, you have the report in front of you, and there are 3 recommendations that are set out on pages 4 and 5 of the report, which I'm happy to move.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Councillor Plant.
Thank you, Chair. A purely parochial question, really. In the report, it says proposed minor change to a small part of the catchment areas for West Bridgeford Infant and West Bridgeford Junior School, where it has been identified that properties are bisected by the existing catchment boundary of these schools. I just wondered, I mean, if not now, if Marion or someone could actually let me know what that means, and which streets are involved, and how, or presumably the school will know about this, and I'd just like to know where it is and what's happening. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? No, I'll ask Marion Clay if she will contact you separately outside of the meeting if you're happy with that, Councillor Plant. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, we've had the recommendations moved and seconded. All in favour? Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. The next item is item 13 on the agenda, which is the Early Support Service Remodelling Project. Again, the report is set out in front of you, and there are 3 recommendations on it's page 88 of 116, which I move those recommendations.
I second them, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions on this? No, in which case can we go to the vote? All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you very much. That is carried unanimously. The next item on the agenda is consultation on the closure of the residential unit at Fountaindale School. Again, you have the report in front of you, and there is 1 recommendation on page 3 of the report, which I move.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any comments or questions on this? No, in which case we will move to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you, that's unanimous. And we move to the next item on the agenda, response to the Home Office consultation on the proposal for changes to the National Transfer Scheme for Unaccompanied Asylum-Seeking Children. Again, you have the report and the questionnaire set out in front of you. There are 2 recommendations, which I move.
Second those, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Plant.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, where do I start, really? I think it would have been helpful if we'd have also had the letter from the Home Office Minister, as well as the sort of draft response to the questionnaire. But I mean, the Labour Group does not approve the general content of the Council's response to the Home Office consultation on the possible changes to the National Transfer Scheme. Practically, the first decision that the Conservative administration made when taking control in 2017 was to withdraw from the voluntary National Transfer Scheme. So the draft response to this consultation is not really surprising. The response raises a number of barriers to participating in the scheme, be it a voluntary one or a mandatory one, which obviously the consultation is also looking at. And namely, they are that the age of the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children are nearly all 16 to 17-year-old males, the lack of internal foster care for that age group, disagreement on the 0.07% measure being a key indicator of capacity, the fact that Kent has a lower number of looked after children per 10,000 than nearly all of its statutory neighbours, including Nottinghamshire, and obviously insufficient government funding, although that has increased, but obviously still does not cover the complete cost of caring for these children. And all of those considerations obviously come down to finance, there's no doubt about it. And, you know, let's be in no doubt, they are real pressing considerations, and they are only going to be increasing, I know that. But they are also considerations that all local authorities are experiencing and which this government needs urgently to address in order to resolve this issue. But at what point, if at all, does compassion override financial considerations? All of us have seen the news, all of us have seen the reports of overcrowded dinghies full of families, children, young men trying to cross the busiest shipping lane in the world to get to the United Kingdom. And they've all suffered incredible hardship to actually get as far as Calais in those dinghies. And yes, the majority of the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who survive that are probably older male teenagers, but not all of them are. And irrespective of their age and their gender, they are still children and they deserve our protection and they deserve our support. The draft consultation response is completely lacking in any positive suggestions as to how the National Transfer Scheme can share the responsibility for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in as fair a way as possible across all upper-tier local authorities. Its lack of compassion for the children most in need of protection from neglect, cruelty and exploitation is staggering. And for these reasons, the Labour Group will not be supporting the recommendation. What we would also like to request is a copy of the final response to the Home Office when that's actually completed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this report? No, okay. I will then deal with the issues that Councillor Plant has raised. Yes, you can have a final copy of the report. I'm hoping that this is more or less the final copy of the report. The first point that you made, Councillor Plant, was that on taking control, one of the first decisions that we made was to withdraw from the voluntary scheme. That's quite right. At least we were up front in doing that and put it on a committee agenda. You, when you took us into the scheme, didn't do that. I sat on that committee when we were in opposition. Councillor Elliott did and Councillor Saddington did. We were not given the opportunity to discuss whether or not Nottinghamshire should go into that voluntary transfer scheme. You didn't do that because you hadn't the guts to do it just before an election. So don't criticise us for taking the decision that we did afterwards. At least we were upfront about it. Now, we don't show any compassion, and compassion overrides finances. We've spent most of this committee meeting talking about the financial pressures that we are under. Where do you think the money is going to come from? Because it's not going to come from some magic money tree. We have got to manage the finances, and I'd like to know what facilities you want us to close in order to fund this scheme. You don't tell us that. Why not? If you really want to be upfront and honest and show your compassion, tell us what you'd close, which children's centres you'd close, which youth clubs you'd close in order to fund it. I have every sympathy with Kent County Council that they're having the problems that they are having, but they are already dispersing those young people across to outside providers. And you say that we don't offer any suggestions. There are many parts of the country that have very few, if any, unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. They can start by going there before they put burdens onto us when we're under considerable pressure. I've already said earlier on in the meeting that I expect the number of our looked after children to increase quite dramatically, and I think it will. I'm not prepared to put them further down the list than people that come across in dinghies illegally, because of course what they should be doing is claiming asylum at the first point of safety. And that isn't at Kent Beach. The first point of safety is probably hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. So don't blame us for that. There are hard decisions to take, and we are prepared to take them to safeguard the interests of our young people for whom we have a statutory responsibility. And I make no apologies for that and will continue to do so while ever I can. I will not put them further down the list. So with those few comments, can we move to the vote? All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Those against, please show. That is carried. Thank you very much. The last item on the agenda is the work programme. You have the work programme set out in front of you. There will be changes to it, of course. Any comments or questions on the work programme? No, in that case, we have a recommendation to approve the work programme. All those in favour, which I move.
I'll second, Chair.
All those in favour. Thank you, that is carried. And with that brings us, that is the last item on the agenda. So can I thank you very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Chairman.
Bye.
Bye.